All right, guys, welcome in to the newest edition, Fade You, Four Idiots, Thanksgiving Eve college basketball preview. You guys know us, the original Four Idiots, me, Chaz, Kmart. Duke is not with us tonight, and we have a special guest tonight who needs no introduction, but he is the walking almanac of college basketball. Welcome, Greg Peterson, Mr. G Unit.
Gentlemen, it is great to be on with you. A happy Thanksgiving to you and yours, and it's a pleasure to be talking spooks with you tonight.
Yeah, well, we appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule, man. So let's get at it. Real quick, there's some teams that we're high on, and coming into this college basketball season, we would love your opinion on a few of them. So it's no secret, us at Fade U, we all smashed UConn plus 2,500 last year prior to the Big East tournament to win March Madness. So UConn is a team that we are high on. Briefly, if you don't mind, Greg, can you give me your opinion on UConn this season, both with and without Castle? I'm hearing he should be back for the Kansas game early December. Do you have an opinion on this team that you wouldn't mind sharing with us?
Even without him, I think that they've proven that they're still one of the best teams in all of college basketball. I want to see if Donovan Clingan can work on his just conditioning a little bit because he's still been on a little bit of a limits restriction. And I do think that part of the reason why his minutes have been a little bit limited is because he did deal with that offseason lower body injury that it made him a little bit questionable for the start of the season, but he's been playing 15, 20 minutes. He's been rock solid. But the guy that really goes under the radar, in my opinion, how about how good Alex Caravan is? This guy is like 6'8", 6'9". He's able to bury threes. I'm not saying he should be like a Wooden Award candidate or anything like that, but this guy is really one of those engines that makes this team run. And I also like the way that Tristan Newton has been more versatile this year as well. We saw him come of age in the NCAA tournament, which is a big reason why you were able to cash all those tickets. And he's far better this year than he was at the start of last year as well. UConn had some pretty good depth, in my opinion. I don't know if I could necessarily put them at number one over a team like Purdue, but certainly I think that UConn has proven themselves to once again be a top 5 team in all of college basketball.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head there. Newton has really come into his own this season. Myself being a little bit of a UConn homer, grew up in the Hartford, Connecticut area, so UConn was the team that we rooted for as kids. Yeah, and then ever since cashing that ticket last year, we've all become fans of this UConn team. So another team I wanted to talk about briefly, who it's no secret to us, the team I am highest on this season. I gave them out earlier prior to the first game of the season at plus 3,000. The Creighton Blue Jays. It is my personal opinion that they have the best, probably the best starting 5 in the country between Alexander. You got what's his name, Stephen Ashworth, Kalkbrenner, yeah, Shireman. I think that starting 5 is dangerous, and in my opinion, the best starting 5 in the country. Any opinion there, Greg?
I think that Creighton is much better than they are a season ago, and the biggest reason why is I wasn't necessarily super duper bullish on Creighton last year because they pretty much were, if they were a restaurant, 5 guys. They had a really, really good starting 5, but they had nobody that could come off the bench. Now you've got Frederick King being able to step up, give you some minutes. Mason Miller has been able to step up for the team. Isaac Trout, who comes in from Virginia, he's a nice mixer and shaper. And one thing that was always a little bit puzzling to me was that they really didn't use Fran Farabello too much last year. They've been using him a little bit more this year, and I think that that's a nice balance for the team because Steve Ashworth isn't quite what Nembhard was last season at the point guard spot, but being able to utilize him in tandem with Fran Farabello, being able to use those guys situationally, I think is big for Creighton. And I always think that Greg McDermott does a tremendous job as the coach of this team. And you just take a look at that Big East landscape. Would you want to go up against those Big Four teams? Because you were talking about UConn. They're absolutely tremendous. Creighton, I think that there's a good chance that they might be able to win the Big East this season. Marquette, they go down to Purdue on Wednesday, but they had a very good showing against Giant of the Earth, Zach Edey. And then Villanova is a team that I think is a little bit of a sleeper as well. So I just take a look at this Big East as a whole. All 4 of those teams, I think any one of those 4 have the chops if the bracket breaks right to be able to make a Final Four run.
Yeah, I mean, could we agree, Greg? Do Do you think the Big East is the best conference in the country?
I would say 1 through 12, 1 through 14, in this case, 1 through 11. I would still go with the Big 12 by a hair. But if you're looking at the top four, there's no question about it. The Big East is, I think what really hurts the Big East is having the likes of DePaul in there and Georgetown. That's really what hurts them in comparison to the Big 12s. But that said, if you're taking a look 1 through 4, 1 through 5, that top half, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. With Marquette, UConn, Villanova. I mean, the top of the Big East is absolutely stacked.
I got an interesting question with Creighton. If it comes down to something like Purdue, you got Zach Edey, and then on the other side of the fence, you get a Kalkbrenner. How do you think something like that, having guys that size that are skilled, breaks down? I mean, is there a big advantage for Creighton comparatively to other teams against a team like Purdue?
I think the big thing for Purdue is being able to have multiple bigs that you're able to throw at them. And I do think that Frederick King is a big X factor there, because I do think that Kalkbrenner and Zach Edey, there's a possibility of being able to have those guys cancel out, because Edey's a little bit better down low, but Kalkbrenner has much more of a jump shot than Zach Edey. But when you're able to throw in there a Frederick King, when you're able to bring at them a little bit of a second look, keep them a little bit off guard, because while you do have a few guys that are trying to come to the forefront for Purdue, like someone like a Trey Colvin, for example, he's going to be looking to step up, Miles Colvin, I should say, for Purdue. I feel like Creighton, now that they've got that depth, they can match up very well with Purdue and Zach Edey.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think Creighton's the team to beat this year. I'm not as high on Purdue as others. Yeah, Kmart, why don't you jump in here a little bit? Being a West Coast guy, I know there's some teams on the West Coast you were looking for some feedback from Greg on. So why don't you jump in here? Why don't you get going with that a little bit?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, my team coming into the season was, Arizona Wildcats. I thought, them picking up Keyshawn Johnson from San Diego State is going to be huge. Jaden Bradley from Alabama, and then obviously Caleb Love from the Tar Heels. I'm not that big on Love, but I think, as we saw, at Duke, he's just going to bring that presence for timely shots. But, in my opinion, they also have a lot of depth on the inside. So similar to what you're talking about, Creighton, Purdue, I think they have the depth that can challenge, just pick up fouls, just hack these guys, if they're in the Elite Eight together. And that's what kind of stands out for me. I'm obviously a USC guy, and I don't know what happened on UCI. So, maybe I think they're going to be pretty good this year too, but Arizona for me is the team that I'm looking out for to possibly win it all.
Arizona has been just so magnificent. And what I think is just so big with Arizona is they can explode at any given time. Because if you saw that game against UT Arlington a few days ago, UT Arlington, I think, was down something like 4 or 5 at the half. That was a really competitive game. And then boom, they just absolutely exploded. I go back to a game that I bet earlier in the year. I took like 30 points or something like that with Southern against Arizona. And Southern was down, I think it was like 3 points with about 2 to 3 minutes remaining left in the first half. And I'm just thinking, all right, this is going to get there very easily. Southern loses by north of 40. And that's just what this Arizona team does. They might not necessarily blow you out in the first 10 to 15 minutes or so, but they're just supreme with their conditioning. They just stick with their offense. And when those shots get going, and because they play so many possessions, it takes out a little bit of variance as well. Much like you don't see a ton of upsets in the NBA because there are so many possessions, Arizona is looking to play that sort of style themselves. I think it makes them so lethal. And if I'm looking at a team in the West Coast to be able to break that string, because keep in mind, the Pac-12 has not won a title since Arizona's in 1997. And, well, if they don't win it this year, I don't know if the Pac-2 is going to be able to get you one anytime soon. But if there is a team that from the West Coast is going to be able to do it, I certainly do think it's Arizona. And I do think that they're one of the most lethal teams with perhaps the highest ceiling in all of college basketball.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. We got Clint in our comments. Arizona can be consistent on defense. As opposed to years past, they can make a run. And yeah, I mean, how many times have they come up short defensively? I mean, I've watched them play. I have a good friend who went to U of A. So every time they're at the pond here in Anaheim, we'd always go to that action. So, excited. I'm kind of a fan through him. And that's what's, really kind of made me focus in on them, more so than I would. Otherwise, they could easily be under my radar.
Absolutely. And I do think that taking a look at some of those teams that do go under the radar is so important as well, because as I always say, money is money. It doesn't matter whether you're taking a look at Creighton, if you're taking a look at Villanova, all those big time teams. But there are some teams like Stephen F. Austin has been very nice to me, a team that does a lot of pressure. They do a nice job of being able to generate turnovers. And I think that that's a big part of this season as well. These teams with unfamiliar styles that might be a little bit under the radar, James Madison, prime example of that. They could be big time money makers. So being able to pay attention to those teams that are a bit under the radar always does pay a lot of dividends, in my opinion, especially this early in the season.
Nothing better than making money on Montana State, man.
Yes, sir. That was a nice upset that they pulled against Cal a few days ago. That I will say. They then lose to UW Green Bay. I believe it was Tuesday night. So that's just the way that college basketball goes sometimes, because a lot of people do ask, with regards to betting college basketball, is it easier or harder at the beginning part of the season? And I think the proper term for it is it's the most volatile, because you could have really, really good or really, really bad results. Like with my DK Network Writer picks, I went from a 6-game winning streak to a 6-game losing streak, which is so frustrating, but that's just what happens in non-conference college basketball, because you're trying to figure these teams out. Bookmakers are trying to figure these teams out. Referees are calling games differently right now than they will in conference play. It is very much a feeling out process, and you just go through pretty much the cycles of grief, the cycles of excitement, pain, torture, absolute jubilation. That's what non-conference college basketball is all about.
Yeah. I mean, I watched the Purdue game right now, and I mean, they were letting them play. It's fun to watch, but I don't know, like I got a kind of off the ball question, because you kind of brought it up, but I've actually found in the past, 5-6 years, it's easier to bet right before conference play and then tournament and March Madness. Like that's where I have most of my success. Like honestly, during conference, it's such a crapshoot. Like you have to be so selective to be profitable, in my opinion. But for whatever reason, I do really well in out of conference. And I don't know if it's because it's more neutral courts, but I don't know. It's weird.
And what I think is interesting is I feel like it goes in waves and swings. Like I think that taking a look at these tournaments that are being played in remote locations is a little bit more difficult than, say, that mundane December game where you get like Michigan going up against UC Irvine or something like that, where you're able to find a little bit of a motivational spot for UC Irvine, things like that. When it comes to things like the Battle for Atlantis, when it comes to these non-conference tournaments, I do think that that's where it does get a little bit more difficult, just because these are tournament games that they become random, and sometimes the difference in being able to hit or miss a bet with regards to these non-conference tournaments as well is like how tightly the rims are wound and things like that. So there's a lot that goes into these non-conference tournaments. And I do think that once you get away from those in early December, that's where I do find a lot of my success as well.
I just want to throw something out there real quick while we're talking about these, all these tournaments going on. I just realized, since the games are not being played in Maui this year, I believe they're on the Big Island, right? In Honolulu.
Day Sheriff Center. Yep.
Right. The unders in those games are 8-1.
Yep.
Rims are tight. Yep. My Chris Moneymaker texted me early. He's been texting me the last couple of days, like, hey, every under in this Maui tournament, just bang it. And they are 8-1 right now.
And that's such a good angle to take a look at. Like in the Battle for Atlantis, I always shade my totals down because they play in sort of like a ballroom. I have no idea why, but they do that. Every single time I watch a Battle for Atlantis, I'm just asking myself, did they make these rims out of literal stone? Like every single ball that hits the rim just flies off.
Yeah,
I have no idea how. I have no idea why. But every single year, I take a look at that Battle for Atlantis. I hammer unders, and every single time it's quite successful. We just saw that Memphis versus Michigan game go way in the heck under the total. Now,
it wasn't even close.
North Carolina versus Northern Iowa did not go my way. You saw North Carolina just get super duper hot in that one. But that is always an angle that I take a look at. And to your point, knowing that the tournament was not going to be in Maui this year caused me to shade down my totals as well, because as we all know, when it's played at Lahaina, when it's played actually on the island of Maui, some of the friendliest rims I've ever seen in my life. And St. Sheriff Center, not so much. That's the home of the old Rainbow Warriors.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Greg, listen, real quick, a couple of quick things. We'll get you on your way here. Like I said, man, we appreciate your time, and we're all fans of your write-ups and all your work, and we love what you do. Could you briefly just touch on a couple teams that you might have been high on beginning of the season? After 5 games, things don't look so hot. And on the flip side, some teams that you were, looking to play against earlier in the season, who after 4 or 5 games here, you have now changed your tune a little bit.
Well, one of those teams I'm feeling a little bit better about is Memphis, because I thought with so much turnover, with so many new guys coming into the fold, that they would have a little bit of a struggle. But so far, so good. Penny Hardaway, I feel like, has really turned the corner as a coach. And I do think that that's always something that you want to do, because there's always those coaches that you feel like, yes, I can trust him, I can't trust him. And Penny Hardaway a few years ago just was not doing a good job of coaching this Memphis team, and he's not on the level of like Bill Self or anything like that. Let's not get carried away, but I think that he's doing a much better job at Memphis and has been over the last year or so than he did in the early part of his tenure. And then a team that I am starting to rise up on a little bit more is a team that is playing just such good defense in Iowa State. This team all of a sudden has more offense than they did a season ago. Now, granted, they've been playing against the likes of Lindenwood, UW Green Bay, Idaho State, so they're not necessarily playing like the juggernauts of the face of planet Earth or anything like that. But this Iowa State team has very much impressed me. We saw TJ Osselberger take a team a few seasons ago that won 2 games during the 2021-22 season. Both of those wins were against SWAC opponents. And then the next year won 2 games in the NCAA tournament. That's a guy that's doing some good work out there in Ames.
Wow. They were not even a team on my radar. Interesting you bring that up. That's a team I'm going to have to look at closer. Kmart, Chaz, anything final thoughts we want to ask Greg before he continues with his Thanksgiving weekend?
Yeah, I got a quick one. More along the lines of trying to figure out when I'm looking at teams, I'm an X's and O's guy when it comes to basketball. I want to see ball movement. I want to see screens. I want to see people trying to get open shots off passes, a lot less one-on-one, which I know is old school. But when you play with older players, 20 in my opinion, smarter and more equipped to win big games. Is that something that you look at? How many freshmen? How much time? Is that a big part of kind of what you do, or is that an afterthought?
I do look at returning minutes, and I do take a look at more of these veteran-laden teams, especially early on during the season. And I do think that it is something that you've got to be taking a look at throughout the year, because a team that I might not be willing to back in, say, the month of November, December, like in Arkansas, that always has those moving parts, I'm going to probably be feeling a little bit better about them in, say, February, March, as those guys get a little bit of chemistry down. So it is something that you do want to be taking a look at, but something else I do want to be mindful of as well. And I feel like we've seen this a little bit with Michigan State as well. Even though you bring back a lot of players, doesn't necessarily mean that they'll take that big giant leap, because in college basketball, I notice this especially with guards. The biggest leap is that year 1 to year 2 leap, which is why I am quite high on Purdue this year, with Fletcher Loyer, Braden Smith being freshmen last season, now them being sophomores. They're a team that I do think is going to be able to take massive strides forward. Meanwhile, if you have a bunch of guys that were like year 3 last year going into their year 4 year, I do sort of take a look at that and think, all right, I'm not going to be able to get as much of a leap with a guy going from year 3 to year 4 as much as I would someone from year 1 to year 2. So it is a little bit of a balancing act, and it is very situational as well. So I will be backing more veteran-laden teams early on during the season, but I will be mindful that these teams with more of those guys taking that freshman to sophomore leap might be able to have a little bit of a higher ceiling.
Got it.
Yeah, cool. Well, Greg, listen, man, we know you got a lot going on. We greatly appreciate your time. Like I said, all huge fans of your work. And from the community, I just want to say thank you from everybody. We appreciate everything you do.
And I appreciate you, gentlemen. I've seen your work a little bit. It's always a good time. And I know that you guys, like myself, are stains for Old Viva Seltzer, which I've been lucky enough out here on the West Coast to get a few of those cans. I saved them for a special occasion. So it is always a pleasure, and really appreciate you guys having me on. A a happy Thanksgiving, I should say, to you and yours.
Awesome. Thanks, Greg. We'll be in touch. We'll talk soon.
See you, Greg. We appreciate it, bud.
Thank you, guys.
Nice. Yeah, so literally just what I expected. The dude's a walking almanac.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he just knows things about like the most random teams ever. It's quite
I've
interesting.
I've never seen anybody that knows every person in the transfer portal and where they went and where they came from.
Yeah, it's just crazy.
Like without even trying. Yeah, like without even trying.
No, it's amazing.
So, yeah, all right. I say, I mean, it was great having Greg on. We hit on a couple of the few teams that we are all, pretty high on. We gave out the Creighton future a few weeks back. You boys are high on that Arizona team out west. So yeah, I mean, I think it was good college basketball pod, get us off the ground and running. Chaz has been holding us down with college basketball in the group chat, absolutely crushing it. I have started off pretty slow at 1-2, but looking to gain some momentum here. So yeah, anyone have any final thoughts before we hit the road?
I'm on Southern Miss tonight.
I want
if you want a late night
I want 60 seconds to tell everyone, do not bet Illinois basketball. Stop wasting your money on Illinois basketball. They are not going to be any good this year.
Just Illinois, period.
Yeah. Their football team was the same way. Their basketball team's in the same boat. Please stop betting Illinois basketball right now. Maybe they'll get better, but I highly doubt it.
I fell for the Illinois trap like 4 times last year. I'm done with them.
Yeah. Nope.
So,
no, they're a team that never gets any better X's and O's wise.
Yeah. I mean, they are pretty awful. But, yeah, so college basketball pod, Fade You, 4 Idiots. Come check us out. We will be back for hopefully in the next couple of weeks. We'll be running weekly college basketball shows like we do. Probably just replace the 4 Idiots on Saturday morning instead of college football. It'll probably become
probably
college
after
basketball. I think that's what we did.
Basketball.
That's what we did last year with Saturdays being the big card. So
yeah, and I don't know. We'll figure out something like, I don't know, collective play of the day. Maybe we'll start posting our plays. We just,
I feel like I'm the only one at Fade You that does a good job of posting his shit.
I can get better at it. I can start to get better at it. With college basketball, it's a little easier. It's harder on weekends all the time. But when you have constant, steady stream of games, you can just make it part of your routine.
Yeah. So that's something that we could work on collectively as a group. But yeah, till next time, Kmart, Chaz, Joey Cheese, first college basketball pod is up. We will see y'all Saturday morning for NCAA football. So happy Thanksgiving. See y'all soon.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Get some turkey.
Y'all.